Daddy?
Dad. Mommy.
We ended up in the school year doing it, which made it more challenging because I was waking up, I was leaving the house at 5 to drive to Orlando to get the very first appointment of the day, to be seen, to see what the process was, and then driving straight back into school. And I had teachers covering my class and my kids, taking them to their specials time, and then I would show up after, right as plan time was ending. And when it was time for because the timing is so specific, when it was time for the trigger shot, you have to do it at a certain time so that when they go in and they retrieve the next day, they haven't released the eggs, but they're formed where you need them. But because of my body all of a sudden going into overdrive, I had to call Mom to go get the shot that I needed from the doctor's office, and she went and picked it up and met you halfway because of leaving work so that you could get it home in time so that I could do the shot at the right time for the whole process. And so I remember being at school out on the recess field, calling the doctor and calling you and calling my mom to get it all worked out, right?
So I watched from outside on a monitor, and I could actually see the needle going in and sucking up some stuff, and then moving around and sucking some other stuff up. I could see more of the process. I could tell a little bit what was going on, but I didn't understand really how it worked in the same way. It was very small scope, but that was pretty straightforward.
Right.
And I think that time they retrieved 20 eggs.
23, I think.
23 eggs. High yield,
right,
as far as that goes.
Which is good and bad.
Yeah.
So, but then because my hormones were so high that they said that they wanted to freeze the embryos and not go straight into letting them grow and putting them right back in, because they wanted me to have a period to
They fertilized them first.
Fertilize them first, right? But for me, they said they didn't want to put them, so I had to have a period again to clear out all of those high hormones, because it wasn't the ideal environment to put these embryos back into. So as the embryos were growing, we were getting phone calls on the updates of them. And so first there were 15 that fertilized, or something to that effect, 15 or 13 that fertilized. And then the number, as they're growing to the stage they want them to be, they called and they said, well, now we're at 8 to 10. And then by the time they got to the stage where they were going to freeze them, and the healthy ones that they wanted, that they thought would turn into a baby for us, they froze 3. So 2 in one vial and 1 on its own. And I went off of the drugs, but then as soon as I had a period, they still have to be in control. So I started a whole new round of shots not to grow my eggs this time, but just to make sure that I was cycling at the right point and my body was making the lining appropriately and all that. So I was still driving to Orlando, leaving the house at 5 and getting monitored so that it would be the perfect timing to put everything back in. They had on the charts to put just 1 embryo in. And I said, whoa, we put 2 in last time and it didn't work, so why are we putting 1 in? And so then the doctor decided that we would thaw all 3 to put in, to see about putting all 3 in. And so when they thawed them, 1 didn't make it, and they put 2 in.
So the embryos that went in have been thawed been frozen for about 45 days, something like that. And then they ended up putting 2 embryos in.
Mm-hmm. The procedure was on a Wednesday, I believe, and so I took the rest, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday off. Just basically laying around the house for those days. So yeah. It is tough when you think people conceive all the time and they're doing all kinds of crazy things, and I should be able to go to school and teach, but instead I had to make all of these sub plans and have someone else in charge of my students. And when I'm just trying to let an embryo attach.
And it was 2 weeks before a blood test. So that's a tough 2 weeks. Just wait, and obviously have the disappointment in our mind from 2 years ago, and this has been a journey for 4 years at this point,
Right.
trying to become pregnant. Do you remember kind of when you had that first blood test and the call?
Well, I wanted to do it on a Monday, but then I told him, well, I'm teaching, and so it'd be better if we did it on a Sunday. So they let us come in special on the Sunday to do the blood work. And so I went in the morning and didn't tell anybody. I didn't call anybody when I was driving, which I usually talk on the phone while I'm driving, and went in and did it. And we just hung out at the house waiting for a phone call. And again, I remember exactly where we were sitting on our couch, and we get the phone call and we put it on speaker so that we can both hear the news, good or bad. And they told us we were pregnant. That was the most exciting phone call in the whole world, because we wanted and we prayed and we were doing everything we could to conceive, and we did.
Most people knew we were going through IVF, and so they kind of know you're in this process. It's not like, oh, you're trying to get pregnant or you're at an age where people think you're going to be pregnant, so they may ask you if you're pregnant. It's, do you have the results yet? When do you get the results?
Right.
And we knew from the previous being unsuccessful that we would just basically lie to people and tell people we wouldn't have certain information for very much further down the road than we actually would.
Right.
And that
So we could process.
deal with it. We didn't have to have people asking us before we were ready. And it also came as a big surprise when we did tell people, because they didn't even know that we would know.
Right. Mom and Dad thought that we were going to find out that we were coming in town so that we would find out the next morning if we were pregnant or not, which is really exciting to be able to surprise them with the news, considering everything is so planned with the IVF. We went in it was 7 weeks one day to see, because we had told our family that we were pregnant, and then we were waiting to figure out if we were pregnant with 1 or 2. And so then we were going in for the ultrasound to see how many heartbeats there were going to be. And so we went in and got to see the baby for the first time. So that was amazing.
Just a little white.
Yeah, flicker on the screen of the heartbeat. And hearing the heartbeat is so cool. It's an indescribable experience, because it's amazing.
Do you remember that? And we always talked, well, what if it's 2? What would that be like? And we were fortunate it was only 1. So that was good. Just hearing the 1 heartbeat, I think we didn't need to be too overwhelmed with that. I do remember receiving a phone call because we were also on lists for adoption. Do you remember that?
Yes. I was 6 months pregnant when we got that phone call.
Okay.
And saying that there was a baby that we were being considered for adoption, and the baby was only like 6 months old and had some issues, and so some medical issues, and so they were asking if we wanted to be considered, and so we had a discussion about it, and ultimately came to the decision that we didn't know how our baby was going to turn out at that point, and so we didn't put our name in the hat. After we had the positive test and heartbeat, and we saw the heartbeat, then Center for Reproductive Medicine releases you to your regular OB/GYN. So started seeing Dr. Benezra, and his other doctors were Dr. Tobias and Dr. Kelly. So we started doing our appointments there. We didn't wait till the 20-week appointment to find out the sex of the baby. We did the early imaging with
Images of life or something like that?
Yeah. And we had the 20-week appointment where they do all of the anatomy to make sure the heart and lungs and everything was developing right, that he has all of his heart, make sure he has 2 kidneys and all of that. And so the ultrasounds looked great. And so it just continued. I wasn't a high-risk pregnancy, even though a lot of people assume that because of going through IVF. But it's a matter of what your body does once you're pregnant. And so I wasn't a high risk. And so went along, everything was good except for the being nauseous. So my due date came and went. And so it was something that I was nervous about, but then by the time ready to have him in my arms, because then you start worrying about the labor and delivery process. And because my first surgery was so much like a C-section with the scarring and the healing process, I didn't want to have a C-section because I knew what it was like to heal from that. And so I really wanted just a regular delivery.
And do you remember the morning of the 29th?
Yes. You got up, went to the gym, and as you were leaving, I got up to use the restroom, and I was pretty sure my water broke because of the feeling, and so I decided I was just, all the stuff we had read said to wait before you go to the doctor, before you go to the hospital, because 1, they're not gonna let you eat, and 2, you need to get it moving, progressing. So I just went back and laid down in bed till you got home from the gym. And then I told you that you weren't going to work today, because my water broke and my contractions had started.
Felt really good and calm and collected. I feel like we had a lot of information. We hadn't had any issues to that point. So there was nothing to get freaked out about. You felt good even though your water had broke.
Yeah, I showered, I shaved my legs, I put on my makeup because I wanted to be pretty for my post-delivery picture.
So we packed up, we took our time, and made whatever.
Mom was there, freaking out.
Right, so that's what I'm getting at. So we felt good about everything, and we felt like we were prepared.
She's like, why aren't you going now? You need to hop in the car and leave. And so she was running around the house like a crazy person trying to shoo us out. She called, my dad told him he couldn't go to work. She called your parents and said, meet us at the hospital. And we hadn't even been officially checked in yet at the hospital because they'll turn you away sometimes. So, but she called everybody and told everyone to drop what they were doing and show up at the hospital with us.
I don't remember when we made it there. It was far earlier than we still probably needed to be there.
Right.
And it was a lot of walking, a lot of doctors coming in and out, a lot of what can we do to pass the time. We watched 2 seasons of Orange is the New Black.
My water broke at 5 a.m. and by 5 p.m. I was still only dilated 5 centimeters. And so I hadn't had drugs at that point. So I was still walking, and so finally I said, that's it, give me the epidural, because I was in pain and nothing was happening. Then I woke up because the epidural wasn't working right. So I started feeling the contractions really severely on just my right side.
I do remember setting up a GoPro, but it took so long that all the batteries had died. So it was just nothing. There was nothing to see from it.
Yeah. 10, 11, I started, they told me that I was at 10 centimeters and I could start pushing. And so I thought, this is no big deal. I can have this baby out, because if I had him out by midnight, then you were going to win the office pool. Because the office was betting on when I was going to go into labor and have the baby. And so if I had him and I started pushing at 11, so I was like, I was in there for Kate's delivery, my best friend, and she gave that baby 2 pushes and he was out. So I was like, an hour, I got this. So I pushed and threw up and pushed and threw up and pushed and threw up for 2 hours. I told you at one point that I was done. Do you remember that?
I remember being on the edge of wanting to throw in the towel and do a C-section.
I just looked at you and said, I don't want to do this anymore. I'm done. Baby's not coming out. And you encouraged me to keep going. And then the doctor looked at me and said, if I snip this one part, then I think he'll come out. And so do you want me to snip it? And I said, you're the doctor. You decide. If it's going to get the baby out, then let's get the baby out. We didn't have a name chosen yet. We were still debating between names.
No. I do remember as you were pushing, just seeing dark hair. Just dark hair. And I could only see a little bit. I'm thinking, is his head really that small? I'm just thinking, well, it's just going to be a little bit more, and he's going to come out. I can see this hair. But I didn't realize the full size of his head until he came out. So we finally made a decision.
Yeah. To cut. And then it was like 2 more pushes, wasn't it? He was out.
I mean, it was a chilling sound, so I don't know, man. But I thought she cut and he just came right out.
No, because I pushed and then his head came out, and then I had to push again for the rest of his
true.
body.
When she cut, the head came out. And that's when I was like, oh my gosh, his head is huge. And then you pushed again and
The rest
he
of it.
came out and he was crying and he was healthy.
Yeah. The experience of giving birth was challenging, but then when he came out and seeing the way that you looked at him was just the most amazing thing, to just see the way that it seemed like you instantly loved him, and I fell more in love with you and with this new baby that, you know, we had been praying for and wanting for so long.
So they weighed him, and then they needed to know what was his name, what was it going to be, and we had it down to 2 names, but we had basically said we wanted to see him first before we were going to ultimately choose. And so we chose Atlas.